Very cool.
Hello, and welcome to Inspire Me Forward. My name is Linda Watson. I am the founder of Inspire Me Forward, and I'm also your host. And this is our 22nd episode. And I was thinking today that we're really January, we're coming up to a full year. So how amazing, and what a year it's been. With us today, we have Kathy Moffatt, and she's entitled this episode, Finding the Ground. So Kathy, I'd love for you to just give a quick introduction to yourself.
Yeah, hi. Well, I'm Kathy Moffatt. You've got the name already. I live in Merrickville, Ontario, which is a little bit southwest of Ottawa, Canada. And I live on a farm with 9 horses, 2 dogs, 1 official barn cat, a few unofficial barn cats, lots of wildlife, coyotes, turkeys, lots of birds, lots of trees, a beautiful place. Oh, and I have a husband. Yes. I have a husband and 2 grown sons. Yes. I forget about the husband and the kids. And I have 2 sons. Yeah.
Awesome.
And 1 grandson.
Oh, lovely. Excellent. Well, thank you for being here. We are so excited to have you share your story with us. As I was thinking about this today, I've got a new book that I'm writing, and one of the chapters is called Windows and Mirrors. And it talks about when sharing our stories and when reading stories, it ties into curriculum for schools and things like that. But it's about every story is like a window and a mirror. The window, we see the world through. Outside of us, we see the world through. And the mirrors, see ourselves in that. And really, every story has a bit of both. And we see through the windows, we see that we're not alone in a story often. And so many often people say, oh, those are the words I needed to hear right now. And that's just seeing ourselves in another story. And really, every story has a balance of a good story has a balance of windows and mirrors. And I've seen that so much in these stories that we all share. And I look forward to seeing the windows and mirrors in your story. Mm-hmm. So let's get this moving along. And the question that I've always asked, or the last maybe half of our episodes we've asked, is, can you share a time when you were the recipient of an act of kindness? Often we talk about giving, but what is it to receive? So I'd love to hear a story. Start with a short story of that.
Mm-hmm. I guess the one that comes to mind is when my mother passed away, and it happened. It wasn't sudden, but it happened within a relatively short period of time. So I would say unexpected in the time frame. And I was busy. I'm the oldest. I was the one responsible for making all the arrangements, which were not pre-planned. And I'm turned into task mode, which is what I do when I'm in stress. I just turn into task, away we go. And I'm running around doing things. I'm grieving. Well, I'm not grieving. I'm just in task. And I get home after, I think I'd made funeral arrangements. I was at the funeral home, and I get home that evening, and I'm tired, and I'm just, I got to go to bed. And then on the doorstep, somebody left me a package, and it was a big box, and it was full of Kleenex, bottled water, and a casserole. And I had no idea who sent it to me. I thought, who did this? And then I thought, well, why all of these things? Of course, the casserole when someone passes away makes sense, and the Kleenex makes sense, but the water, and I couldn't figure out why the water. And but well, of course, we all need water, and so I'm a bit of a sleuth. So then I figured out who had given it to me, and she says, well, with all the crying, and I got a hold of her. And she said, well, with all the crying, you're going to be dehydrated, so you need to drink water. And it made me smile and kind of cry and smile at the same time. It was a beautiful gesture with a little bit of humor attached, and it just made me feel so wonderful. So yeah, and that has always stuck with me.
That's beautiful. Just to somebody had taken that time to do that, with that thought.
Hmm.
Simplest of things.
Absolutely.
Uh,
Absolutely. And there was a practicality to it, of course.
Absolutely.
But also, you're right, that taking the time to do that, to put it in a box, and it was nicely put together. Driving over, leaving it there, knowing when to leave it, probably figuring out when I would be home. And yeah,
Yeah,
it's really lovely. And I often think about that.
I bet. And without the need to be known.
That's correct. Yeah.
Then you're sleuthing
Which,
to find out there was no need to be known.
no, and I think when you do something, a true act of kindness that really comes from your heart and does not come from your ego,
Yeah.
you don't need to be known, right? Because sometimes we do things because we want, the oh wow, thank you, the accolades. It's kind of like when you check your comments on Facebook or something. Am I really posting something that's beautiful content that I don't care what anyone says, or am I in it for how many likes and comments? It's kind of the same thing. And you're right. Now I found out who it was because I was so curious. But in the end, yeah, it was a beautiful thought. And you're right. The anonymity was quite lovely too. It was really heartfelt.
Yeah. Well, that it sort of makes me think. I used to work with a group of youth that I would always often challenge them to, when was the last time you gave without telling anybody that you gave?
Mhm.
Without, again, social media, even now, like, I did this today, or we would go home and tell somebody I paid for somebody at Tim Hortons. When's the last time we gave without anybody having to know? It can't, like you said, it comes from the heart, and that's all that's needed. So
That's right. That's
yeah,
right.
what a
Yeah.
lovely story.
Yeah.
Lovely story. I hope the casserole was awesome too.
Yes, it was. That was an added bonus. Yeah.
Uh, okay, so let's step into our touchstones. We always ask about a touchstone from something from childhood that you've sort of kept in your heart or kept within you. Maybe sometimes during life it goes away for a bit, but it's something that you always remember back to as a child that you used to do. Again, some of the ones that pop up, daydreaming. We have one person that spoke, a guest that spoke of daydreaming, and during as adult years, she was, stop, or especially in maybe in high school years, like, stop daydreaming. It's something that we maybe did as or loved, or like to, be a place we like to be as a youngster. So what might be a touchstone for you?
Yeah, for me, it's always been the water. Going in the water, particularly going in the water naked, which sometimes would mortify my mother. I've always loved to do that. And there is something about the water. Maybe it's because both my parents were lifeguards and swimming instructors, so I was brought up with water. I was one of these babies that my mother was quite progressive, and I was one of these babies that learned to swim at 8 months. She just threw me in the pool, and you better breathe, right? And that was done. That was the thing. This was in the 60s.
Yeah.
And I think maybe I was a fish in a past life, but it's always the water. And I seek it out all the time still. So it's a touchstone from then, but it's something I still, and sometimes it's subconsciously I seek it out. But thinking about it, I go there a lot, right? And I live on the water. Well, not I live on a road that overlooks the Rideau River. We're on the opposite side, but I'm right on the water. I don't think there's a coincidence with that. But I love being in the water, particularly lakes and streams, not so much pools. I mean, I will go into pools, and there's something about being naked in the water, which I love. And if I have that opportunity, I do it. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
I love the water.
Awesome. Awesome. I'm just sitting in that, and that's just the flow of the water around us, and it's like being held.
It is.
In a moving way. It's like being held.
Yeah. And that, particularly when you're in moving water, like if you're in a river or a stream, you're feeling it moving around you, and there's a life to it. There's an energy to it that flows. Yeah, and being right in it is good. And I like being on it as well, like in a boat. But it's funny, I recently took up kayaking, and I just fell in love with it from the moment I sat in a kayak. And I used to canoe a lot as a kid too. And I think, why do I like the kayak better than the canoe? Because it sits right in the water, whereas the canoe is on top of the water. I want to be in the water. Yeah. Yeah. The kayak is right in the water.
It's right in it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah.
You don't, you don't kayak on the Rideau?
Yeah, you can. Yeah.
Can
I
you
actually
really?
live. Yeah. Yeah. I live right across from the river, and I throw the kayak in the back of my truck, and there's a boat launch, about 300 meters from where I live, and I dump it in the water and hop the kayak. It's great.
Oh,
Yeah.
what
It's great.
freedom. What freedom. Lovely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so let's get into your story. So you've chosen to share with us your journey of adopting your boys, and where that's taken you. And so I'd love for you just to take some time and set the stage for us.
Yeah. So when I was in my early 30s, my husband and I, we were struggling to have children, and I couldn't seem to get pregnant. So we started to go through fertility testing, and we were just starting the process of that. And then I was having some pelvic problems at the time. And to make a long story short, during an exam, a gynecologist was concerned about something she saw on my cervix, and it turned out to be a very rare form of cervical cancer. And the irony of it being discovered while you're trying to get pregnant. But anyway, she discovered it, and I knew immediately. She didn't have to tell me, just at the exam, I knew that there was something horribly wrong. And so I ended up having a radical hysterectomy pretty quickly thereafterwards. They did it quickly because it was quite aggressive form of cancer. Luckily, I mean, they caught it early, and I didn't have to do anything other than have the surgery. But, while I was in the hospital recovering, and I had said earlier, I'm very task oriented. I'm like, okay, well, that solves the fertility problem. Let's adopt. And it was always a natural thing for us because my mother was adopted and my husband's adopted, and I've been surrounded. So adoption to me was a natural thing. So I wasn't even at home recovering yet. I was still in the hospital planning, okay, how do we go about it? So we spent, was about a year process going through a home study and getting involved in adopted, and we ended up adopting 2 boys through the Children's Aid Society. They were biological brothers. At the time, they were 18 months and 3 years old, and they had been in foster care for about a year. We ended up all of a sudden becoming a family, and I had all of these visions of, wow, well, now we're a family. It's going to be, perfect. 2 kids, husband and wife, and, and life went on. We were told at the time that, with adoption, there is this nature nurture component. But as long as your children were under 5, and they were at the time, that the adjustment would not be too difficult, and that a beautiful nurturing home would trump everything else. That's what we were told. Now, bear in mind, this was in the mid-90s. So, and that's what I believed. And I believed that for quite a long time. Although even now, though, in hindsight, looking back, there were some signs of trouble early on, but I didn't know. I didn't, you're a parent. I didn't have any frame of reference when my youngest particularly would have these stubborn streaks and hiding under tables and things like that. I just never thought there was any problem. And so, we moved into it, and were kind of a normal family life, I thought. They obviously went to school, they played sports. My oldest was into music. We did all of these kind of things, and I would call it typical. Well, I guess what's typical, but typical family life. And then in the teenage years, things started to fall off the rails. And at the time, it's like, okay, is this normal teenage behavior, experimenting with marijuana and, skipping school and these kind of things. But it didn't really stop. Like it escalated, particularly, with my youngest son. And I don't even know how I would describe it, but but still, again, I thought, oh, maybe it's just he's going through more horrible teenage stuff than than others. And but then he started taking off and disappearing for a few days on end, and then it was like, okay, we sought the help. He was at that time, I think, about 14, and we sought the help of the Children's Aid Society, who we adopted them through, to maybe get some assistance and maybe some counseling and some help and the whole bit. And so they weren't particularly helpful, although we did get some referrals to some professionals to help. And so went through some family counseling and got him to, when he was home, to participate. But and then his older brother got into it too. So then the two of them would be taking off and disappearing. And and then, then there was crime. And then they started getting picked up by the police, getting arrested for little things, skipping school. And then we started this process of being, we're in and out of youth court, particularly with the during this time, we were trying to get help. So we did family counseling. The youngest, we ended up having a psychiatric evaluation at a hospital to see if he had some kind of psychiatric illness. No, it's just behavioral, take this medication and he'll be fine. And it got worse and worse. And then the resources were getting thinner and thinner. And as they became thinner, he got older. And once he turned 18, then it was like there was not a lot we could do. And he couldn't live in our house because he was stealing from us and he was becoming aggressive and violent. And at the same time as all this was going on, living in a small community, there was a lot of judgment about this. So things would happen in the community and you would hear about it, oh, those Moffatt boys, what's going on with them? And look what they're up to. And there was all this judgment. And I remember someone saying to me, well, it was a friend recounting something that somebody else had said. Oh, the nut doesn't fall far from the tree, those Moffatts, and it was pretty awful. And it was embarrassing. And at the same time, I couldn't save my kids. And the older one, as I said, was not quite as bad, but the younger one, it was really quite troubling. And so I felt like, we were told that nurture would help, and I thought we did all the right things. And why was this happening? And there was a lot of blame and self-doubt around it. And why the other thought came in my head was, why, when I was determined that I couldn't have children, why did I not just listen and say, well, then don't have children? Why adopt? Is this a problem? And there was a lot of that going on. And so that's, I would say the first 14 years was like normal, whatever that is. And then it just fell off the rails, and there wasn't a lot of help and support. And certainly the idea of the nurturing part was kind of falling apart, right? It's like, okay, well, and then I started to think, well, probably maybe all this other stuff it's nature, right? It's genetics, and that's kind of, where I was thinking. But so that's where it came and where it was. And at that time, I had a pretty big job. I worked in for a large publicly traded American company in technology, and I was traveling, and these things, the arrests and all of this stuff was happening while I was away. And then you're thinking, oh, geez, do I have to quit my job to deal with this? Like it was just, I called it my mother's hell. So, at that point it was like mother's hell. And so that's the first part of the story.
Sure. Yeah, you spoke earlier a bit about, when we spoke a bit about like, where does childhood trauma come into this? And So what did were you able to go back and see where they had come from?
Yeah. So, at the point where things were really going off the rails, and the path, particularly that the youngest one was on, was clearly not a healthy path. I started to think about, well, what happened to him, particularly that would cause this. And I started to do some looking into trauma, right? So what does trauma really mean? What kind of trauma did he have? Because when we adopted them, we were told there wasn't any trauma. They had a birth mom who was young, and the oldest boy, his name is Thomas. He lived with the birth mom until he was 2, and he had all of that early skin on skin contact, and she was still with her partner at the time, and she clearly loved him, and so he had a lot of that motherly love. My youngest son didn't have that. When he was born, we found this out after she left him alone after he was about 2 days old, and just left the apartment. And she was distraught at that point in time because the birth father of our oldest son, not the same as the youngest son, was incarcerated, and he was being deported. He wasn't a Canadian. And so he had left her, and she had no resources. And so he did not get any of that. And we discovered that. And so then that was like, oh, aha, what is that? What is that? And now, of course, there's so much research on trauma, and abandonment and attachment are parts of trauma. And so clearly, his issues are related to that, that early trauma. Whereas the older son, although he had some issues with drugs and stuff too, but not to the same extent, he had healthy attachments. And when I look back today, when I look back now, and I think back to how they were as children, it was very clear. My oldest son could form friendships, healthy attachments, whereas my youngest struggled. And at the time, I didn't really think a lot about it. I thought, he had some friends, but it wasn't the same kind of friendships. And so when I started to think about the trauma at such a young age and how it manifested itself later on, it made so much sense. But back when we adopted, there wasn't a lot known about it. There's a lot more known about it today. But the reality is you can't really do much about it, right? Today you can't do much about the fact that happened. But I do believe that was what is the case. And so and that manifested himself into not having healthy attachments to people, means and not caring about yourself. So you do stuff to yourself because you don't care about yourself, and then you don't have healthy attachments with people. And so he would constantly be using people all the time for whatever reason, and not having any really good friends, or would go through friends and girlfriends and all this kind of stuff. So so it was all related to, to sit and look at it today, I know it was all related to that.
Yeah. So I'd like to sort of step into you for a minute here. And how were, maybe in their later teens, you said you were working for a large company, but how were you coping?
Oh, yeah. So I would go to work all day, and I would drink wine all night. So that's what I did. So, from, I would say probably a good 10 years of, I would say, self-medicating with alcohol. So, and we talk about the early teens, and then we get into, the 20s, which is where it got even worse with my youngest son. And at that time, his behaviors escalated into harder drugs, and then escalated into different crimes, more violent crimes, so assaults and things like that. And you'd always find out about it because the police would come looking for you, and they'd be looking for him, and they'd come to the door, and living in a small community, Sometimes you knew the police officer, they'd be knocking on the door, and there'd be someone my husband played hockey with, and oh, where I'm looking for your son, he's done this. And I was just like, I just can't cope with all of this. So yeah, I would go to work all day, and then I'd come home and I'd crack open a bottle of wine and then repeat. Like, it was constant set of repeating up until, well, I mean, it continued for quite a while, but it kind of hit the fan when so then he started getting incarcerated for longer periods of time for assaults and things like that, or breaches of probation. And then you're constantly going to jail to visit, which was so traumatic and stressful. And I wasn't doing a good job of releasing any of that. I get in task mode. I got to go to jail. I got to get him clothes. I got to go to court with him. I got to be there because I'm his mother.
Yeah.
And it escalated to a point where he was charged with pretty horrific crimes. And he was starting to abuse women. And that was when it got really bad.
Yeah.
And it got to a point where he had assaulted his girlfriend, who was pregnant at the time. And he had been in jail for 8 months up to that time, waiting for trial. And I was involved with the lawyer would call me, right? Well, this is what he needs. He needs the support. And so I remember going to the trial, and it was a week-long trial, and I had to sit through it. And it was just, at the time I thought, I have to sit through it. And watching your kid walk into a courtroom in chains, the sound of the chains, just I can still hear the sound of the chains, into the prisoner's box, and then having to sit through a week of testimony on both sides, and watching it. And then the woman that he assaulted, this young girl who was at the time was about 6 months pregnant. At that time at the trial, she already had the baby, and she was like 17. And it was just, I looked at her and I thought, oh my God, what's he done? Like, why am I even sitting here? But he's my son. Like, you can't not, right?
Just yeah.
And I sat there and I sat through the trial every day, and listened to both sides of the story. And a couple of things come to mind. I understand now why women don't report assault, because what they put her through in terms of her testimony was just heartbreaking. And I'm on the defense side, and on the prosecution side was her and her mother and her friends, and I'm there by myself, just and they're looking at you, and there's the judgment piece. And oh my God, that's the mother of that monster. And I remember, but I knew I had to be there, right? But it was just eating me inside. And then I go home and I'd crack open a bottle of wine and get up the next morning, drink a bunch of coffee, and go back and do it all over again. And that was really the pinnacle of the trauma for me, was sitting through that. And at the end, he didn't get convicted of all of the crimes. He got sentenced for 2 weeks just for assault, and then he'd already served 8 months. So then they let him out. Well, where is he going to go? So we brought him home. And bringing him home, you're hopeful, right? You're thinking, okay, guilty. He was only convicted of these things, but I knew in my heart that some of the other things were true. It just couldn't be proven. But you can't say that. That's your child, right? And so we brought him home, and thought, okay, I'm back into task mode. I'm going to fix this. We'll get him cleaned up. We'll get him a job. We got him a car. We live in a rural area. You need a car to get to work, and things were going pretty well for a couple of months. And I was drinking less then. I was like, okay, we're coping. I wasn't dealing with anything going on inside me really, but at least he was safe and he hadn't been arrested and I hadn't been back in court again. So there were a couple of months, and then he started to disappear on the weekends again. And then I find out that he was driving to the job. It wasn't going to work. He'd lost the job, but he didn't tell us. And And then we found, I was getting ready to do some laundry, and I told him to do his own laundry, but he was terrible at it. I thought, oh my God, the room is starting to smell. I'll go do the laundry. So I go grab, again, you know, I'm a mom, I'm going to go do his laundry. And I get his clothes, and I put my hand in the pocket of one of his coats, and I pull out a bag, and it was full of drug paraphernalia, including needles. And this is the first time I saw that, oh my God, he's doing injectable drugs. And good thing it was in a bag, because I could have punctured myself. But and then I thought, I have to confront him with this. And even so, my husband and I, we talked about it, and we confronted him with that. And he just said, oh, no, I'm holding it for a friend. I mean, he was a master liar, which a lot of people that are addicted are. But anyway, but that confrontation, I think he kind of knew that the jig was a little bit up. And then it started to really slide from then. And then my husband found more drug paraphernalia a couple of weeks later, and then they had a conversation. And then we said, we can't live like this. And so then he left and just took off. And that would have been probably about 2016, I guess. I'm thinking about the time frame. And then from then on, it was this in and out of different places he lived, sometimes calls from the police to come and get him from somewhere. He'd get arrested, and you'd have to go pick him up. And I would do it for a bit, and then I couldn't do it anymore. It was just, I just can't. I'd be waiting for the phone to ring, and it's like, oh my God, where is he now? Right. Or he'd call, I'm in the middle of nowhere, I need somebody to come get me. And he had precarious housing. And then he ended up, you know, being housed and then homeless, and housed and then homeless. And it was just, and then there was that cycle of homelessness, incarceration, couch surfing, and some housing. And that continued for quite a while, actually. And the drinking continued through then as well. Although, you know, I still held down a job. Nobody knew. It was my secret, really. Functioning corporate woman by day, and you know, drinking a bottle of wine a night. It was not healthy. It was not a healthy coping. It was not a healthy coping mechanism. Yeah. So,
so I'd like to sort of take a left turn here for a minute and just look to you. And where did your path go? You at some point you went enough, and you've said here sort of you sort of went, I need to find ground. I need to find calm. I need to find that. What was that point? And how did you find that ground?
Well, there were a couple things that happened. I actually always, you know, when I think about, you know, during this whole time, I would always go out to the horses anyway. It was kind of like they pulled me in, and that was just subconscious. So even though I was, you know, was drinking too much, I wasn't drinking during the day and stuff like that, but during the day or on the weekends, and I would be feeling, I would go out to the horses. I just sit with the horses. It was just a subconscious thing. And they helped me. I just feel grounded around the horses. And so that was kind of threading in and out that period of time where he was homeless or in jail, that period of time. So that would have been in his mid-20s. I did a lot of that. And then what happened was there was a pivotal moment where I had a horse that I lost. And at the time that I had lost the horse, I was getting ready to go horse camping with some girlfriends, and I was taking a different horse, and I was going to cancel. And my girlfriend said, no, you come, we'll help you heal. We'll go riding, and come on up. And so I said, okay, I will. And I remember driving and crying half the way up there. And then I remember stopping halfway as well. And then something came up, my phone pinged, and something came across my phone, and somebody had posted something on social media about him, that he had assaulted this other girl. And it was going like, it wasn't viral, but it was being shared all over the place. It was a photo of him, and it was on social media. And then I had people messaging me, is this your son? Is this your son? And then I lost it. I was in a bathroom in a truck stop, and I just lost it. I was just crying, and I was like, oh my God. So I don't know what I'm going to do, but I had the wherewithal, as opposed to turning around and coming home. I had the wherewithal. I continued, and I drove up to where I was going camping with my girlfriends. And when I got out of the trailer in the truck, and they saw me, and they thought they were consoling me about the horse. Yeah, the loss of the horse was
really?
traumatic.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was more than that. And then I shared it all with them. I just had to talk about it, and they held space for me that whole weekend. And then I was like, I got to do something about this. This is just, I can't deal with this. So when I got back from that trip, I decided, I'm broken. I need help. And so then I sought out counseling. And that whole situation caused me to seek the counseling. And what the counseling did for me was to help me piece back pieces of me where I could ground myself. Without having to, drink. And so she gave me some tools, and it didn't happen all of a sudden, but bit by bit. So tools of, a little bit of cognitive behavioral therapy, a little bit, I took up yoga. I quit drinking. I started to do meditation, and all this didn't all happen all in one. This was like a process. And as I was moving through this process, my body was feeling better, and I was starting to release some of this stuff. And I realized that he was on his path and I was on mine, and we were in our lanes, and there's a median, and you don't cross the median until you get to a point where there's an intersection where you do. And that's the visualization I had, was the 2 lanes and the median.
That's a great one. Yeah.
And you stay in that, and that anchored me. And then I started spending a lot more time, because I was feeling better and I wasn't hungover every morning. And I was like, oh, I was spending more time with my horses. And then the yoga got me more in tune with my body. And then I learned how to say no. And when he would call, I would say no. And it was a hard thing to do, but I just let go with love. I let him know I loved him, but I would say no. And then gradually, I became better. I would say it took a good solid year for me to feel my feet, grounding with my horses, and move forward and stop, because what I was doing was I was enabling him, bringing him home. And that's the other thing I learned through therapy. It's codependency. You're enabling him. She said to me, comfort is the enemy of the addict. You don't have to, it's not tough love. It's just, if you make him comfortable, it's easier for him to use. So let him know you love him, but set a boundary. And the boundary was, and I very firmly set, if you want help with your addiction, I will be there to help you. But other than that, we can't have you here. Right. So, and that was a hard thing to do. And I had to stick to that. And when I would waver with that, I would either go out in nature for a walk, go practice some yoga, or more often than not, I would go spend time with the horses. And I really believe, the combination of the event and the counselor, and the attunement with the horses, it saved my life, because I was probably, continuing to drink like that, you're gonna kill your liver, right? So it's like, or worse, things will get worse, So so that's what happened, near the end. And then now it's considerably better. I'm not saying there's not sadness and grief about it, but still, I'm in a much healthier position now than I was back then.
Absolutely. The word community keeps coming to me. Could we dive into that? And now you spoke at the beginning, you've spoken in different contexts in community here, and you spoke of being in a small community and how the word gets around, and there was that judgment but I wonder, was there support from the community too? And then you spoke of your dear friends at camping that held space for you as a community. So
Yeah.
can we just dive into community a little bit? The word just keeps popping up, and I keep writing it down.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a very good question. At the beginning, when things started to fall off the rail, I didn't think the community was my friend. I just thought they were, and maybe it was what I was thinking they were thinking all the time, right? So
Sure.
maybe it was my own judgment on myself too, but there was gossip in the community, and for sure. So at that time, earlier on, it was like, no, community is not my friend. But I did have some, and I'm kind of blessed now, and even more blessed now. And that's what's saving me even more today, is my community of friends, mostly these beautiful women that I surround myself with. But then I did have my girlfriends that I go riding with. And actually one of them is the one that left the bottled water and the Kleenex
Really?
and the casserole
Lovely.
and the casserole. Yes. She
Lovely.
was one of them. And there were a couple of others, and they really got it. Right. So, and they're still very, very good friends, and they're not, and they never judged about it. But I didn't talk to them a lot about it because I was embarrassed. I was ashamed.
Sure.
You carry shame. You think, oh,
Yeah.
I'm a shitty mother. I've got, a son that's an addict, and he's been in jail, and he's abused women. Like, what kind of mother has a child like that? That's what I thought, and I hid it. I didn't talk about it a lot. So, I mean, they
Yeah.
kind of knew things were tough with them, but I never shared. I
Yeah.
never really shared until that weekend. That's
Yeah.
when because I had to, I was going to
Yeah.
explode. And so they held space, and yeah, it was beautiful. So you're absolutely right. So community shifted. And so they're still there. And when I started to go to counseling and was doing some of these other things, and then I quit drinking, to be honest, I had to change some of my community too, because there were girlfriends I had that all they want to do is go out and party and have a good time. And I couldn't, and they didn't get it. And so then I changed. I kept these core people that saved me. And then I had to walk away from some friendships because what's wrong? There's nothing wrong with you drinking wine every day. Everybody does that. No, not really. But society says, well, it's the only drug you have to justify not taking, right? If I'd said to somebody, oh, I quit heroin, yay for you. You say you quit drinking. What's the matter with you? You don't drink that much. Well, they're probably questioning their own drinking, but so yeah, so there was a shift in community. And if I think today, my community now are very much like-minded people around horses. So a very specific kind of horse community I'm involved in, people that are attached to horses in a very deep attuned way, attached to the spirit. So even some of my horse friends changed as well, because I became so open and attuned. And when you're sober, everything's so clear. So, well, this is clear. And then I practice equine experiential learning. And when I started to do that, then all of a sudden these people started to pop into my life. Yoga people, energy healers, Reiki people. And now when I look at my circle of friends, it's like there are all these kinds of people. They fill my cup. I'm very comfortable to share with them all of these other stories. Nobody judges. And they all move into the light, right? So so I'm really lucky that way. At this specific group of women, we have a monthly get together. It's a circle. It's a women's circle, intergenerational women's circle, and it's beautiful. And I would have thought, geez, even 10 years ago, I would have thought, I'm going to sit around a circle with a bunch of women and we're going to be really, really open. And yeah, we really are, So it's beautiful. So I discovered real community, and I really discovered really who I was too. Like, through talking about being very task oriented, I would always bury everything and just move into tasks. I'm going to go to work. I'm going to go to do this. I'm going to save my drug addicted kid. Oh, I'm going to make cookies for the bazaar. I'm going to do this and do that. And meanwhile, it's trauma stacking. It's all just sitting in your body. And
I haven't heard that one before.
Yeah, yeah. It,
Yeah.
it, it kind of felt like there was a light in my body, and on top of it were books all stacked on top of it. And it got the stack of books got too big for my body to hold it. I had to start peeling the books off the shelf.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's really started, with those girlfriends that
Yeah.
weekend. And then thinking, okay, I took a book out, maybe two. And then it's like, oh, there's space. There's space.
Space. Yes.
Oh, there's nothing wrong with going to counseling. I need help. Go to counseling. Oh, she says, do this. Throw a couple more things out. There's space. What comes into that space? Light comes into the space when you get rid of that stuff. And so
Yeah.
now, because I don't feel I have any books sitting in there really right now, there's a lot of space. And when you have the space and the light comes in, then you attract the light. And that's happened now in the past, I would say 2 years, is incredible. Like,
Really.
you can't really make it up, like how things have changed, in terms
Really.
of, in terms of my life. Right. So yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. So.
Can you share a time when an interaction with a horse or a horse or sitting with a horse? Again, I just have this vision of just the light coming in. Like, can you share a time when you were just with the horses, or I don't know the rest of that, but it's just coming to me that you just had a moment with a horse. And it's like, oh, there it is. There it is.
Yeah. Yeah, that happens a lot now, but I can think of a succinct moment, when I had found out that my youngest son was homeless again, and it was around Christmas time, and I was in touch with the Salvation Army has an outreach program in Ottawa. That's where he was. He was in Ottawa, and I found out through them, somebody had the wherewithal to send me a message. I can't remember how it came to me. And, but I found out he was homeless again. And I thought, oh my God, it's winter and he's homeless and it's cold. And then your heart is just, you just feel like I got to go find him and I got to go rescue him. And I ended up going to the barn, and I had sent an email off to them trying to find out kind of where he was. And they're not really supposed to tell you. At that time, he was an adult. And I said, I'm going to go to the barn, and I'm just going to hang out in the barn. And I remember being in the barn with my mare, Lily, who's this beautiful, big, black draft cross mare. And she was in her stall, and I'm over by the stall and I'm crying. And it was like, I could feel, she's got this, what I call grandmother energy, this horse. It's like, and we all need our grandmothers, right? And I just felt this beautiful warmth coming out of her. It'll be okay. He's resilient. He's been homeless before. Don't worry, and yeah, that's a really specific moment,
Wow.
where, and I have two horses. Well, I have several horses on the property, but her and the other, the one in the photo that I shared is her brother, Quinn. Him too. I've had some pretty special moments with him where the light has come in, as well. When my mother died, and I had gone through all the funeral stuff, and I'm sitting out and it was like, oh, the funeral's done. I was like, oh, I can breathe. And then the emotion comes through, and I remember taking a chair, going out of I have a photo actually of my feet in this. So I will go out, I'm in my pajamas with Birkenstocks on. Okay, don't judge me being a horse person wearing Birkenstocks out in the field, but I took a lawn chair and I sat it out in the field, pasture where he was, and he comes over to me and he's just walking over, and I was just the grief was starting. I was starting to feel the grief. And he ends up, he's such a mouthy horse. He comes in and you feel it. When he walks into your space, there's just this presence, and he comes over and he takes the Birkenstock off my foot. I have a picture of it he's got it in his mouth. Yeah. He took the sandal off, and I stood out there, sat out there with a cup of coffee and just sat with him, and felt the beautiful, beautiful energy. But yeah, those are two different moments that But those are the ones that just come top to mind, but
Sure.
it
No, that's really cool.
happens.
Yeah.
It happens quite a bit. Yeah.
Without doing anything other than just going to be in the presence.
Well,
Just
yeah,
being
like, and
present.
sometimes they just come to you. I remember another one. This is a bit of an interesting story. I decided through this journey of lightness and opening and being curious about everything. And when you get attuned to Reiki, everything floods in. So
Sure.
it's like, oh, yeah, I'm gonna go get my chart done. And I've always been a bit skeptical about that stuff. So I said, I'm gonna get my chart done. Why not? All this other curiosity and these little crumbs that fall.
Yeah.
Let's go do that. So I decided to go do that. And when you get your chart done, you need to know their date of birth and the time of birth. And I didn't know my time of birth. And my mom has passed away, and my dad, I called him. My dad's still alive, but he didn't know. I mean, this was 1961. He wouldn't have been in the room, you know, he didn't remember. And then I'm thinking, oh, so the lady that was going to do it for me, well, I could probably find it for you through Akashic Records and all this kind of stuff. And don't worry about it. I said, okay. And then I'm walking out to go see my horses, and Lily, the mare I'm talking about. I'm walking through the gate, and I have a big rock out there that I sometimes go sit on when I'm feeling, for a variety of reasons. When I'm sad, I go there. When I'm happy, I go there. I call it my sitting rock. And I'm going out there getting ready to go to my sitting rock. And all of a sudden in my head, and Lily's up at me and she's like looking at me with these intense eyes. And all of a sudden in my head, 803 pops into my mind. 803. Where did that come from? 803. I thought, what is that? So then I thought, oh, is that the time of day I was born? And then I thought, I remember my mom telling me once that you were born at a respectable time of the day, and we're all morning people. So I figured 8:03 in the morning. So I decided maybe that's it. I'll go with it. Other people would think it was crazy. All of my old friends would think, are you drinking too much? And my new friends would think, of course, it's your intuition. It's your knowing.
Yes.
It's a spirit, whatever. So I call the woman who is doing my chart for me. And she said, oh yeah, I went into your Akashic Records and I found out what time you were born. 8:03 in the morning.
Whoa.
No word of a lie. No word of a lie. And then it's like, oh my God.
Thanks, Lily.
Thank you, Lily. Yeah. And then when she did my chart, which was very interesting, was like, oh my God. There was a lot of, oh my God. So I never would have done that.
Yeah.
Even 3 years ago. No, I would have been, not that I didn't believe, but I wasn't as open. I'm so much more open.
Sure.
And you know what? And the trauma with, my youngest son, I love him dearly. No question. There's never any question about that. But if I hadn't gone through a lot of that, I wouldn't be doing what I am.
No.
And if I'd continued on the path of codependency and enabling, I never would have found my feet and got grounded and just, okay, let's move ahead and do this. I never would have. I wouldn't have dug myself out. I don't know where I would have been. Probably, not very healthy, probably, So very, very interesting what they bring to you. And
for sure.
The key is to be open, to it, right?
Yeah. Can I ask how your son is doing now? How both of your sons are doing now?
Yeah. So my oldest son is doing great. He's got a new girlfriend who's lovely, and he works in the restaurant. He's a musician, AKA I do music, and then I work in a kitchen. So he works in a restaurant, and he does his music. And his girlfriend is also in the restaurant business. And he's doing fine. He lives about half an hour from me.
Nice.
My youngest son, who had been estranged from us for about 3 years, showed up on our doorstep middle of July, and he walked to our house from the city of Ottawa, which is about 85 kilometers away, and he walked home. He told me it took him 18 months. I get this knock at the door and he's standing right there, and I thought, oh my God. And he was crying, and he was skinny, and he just looked horrible. And he said that he needed help. And I was like, okay. And I'd always said to him that if you are willing to take a step in the right direction, I will take a step with you. And so we brought him in, and He shared with what had been happening. He still hasn't shared all of it. There's a lot of trauma, I'm sure, with the lifestyle he's lived, but
Yeah.
he shared some things. And so he wanted to get clean. And at the time he was smart enough to get into a safe supply program. So he was on safe supply when he showed up. Just shows you, I mean, he's a very intelligent young
Sure.
man, and
Yeah.
he figured that out. And so he was with us. We got him into detox. We looked into rehab, and that he stayed with us for about 4 months while he got healthy, and helped her. He helped around the farm. He wasn't using. Got him into a Suboxone program as well once he got off the safe supply, and he had some health issues that we helped him with. But and then we waited for rehab, and that's tough. It's very hard. We hear about it on the news all the time, this crisis with fentanyl and other drugs, and fentanyl being the big one. The period of time from detox for him to get into rehab was 4 months. And I don't think he would have survived that if he hadn't come home, because it was easier for him to stay sober at home because there's no place to go. Like he'd have to walk. Well, he's capable of walking. We know that he'd have to walk, but he didn't want to, and he stayed sober, and so he's been in rehab now 3 weeks, actually. So, I'm hopeful.
Wow.
But I'm in a much better headspace, and I know now that, and I knew what I needed to do for him without him moving into my boundaries, right? So I've set boundaries, but he's not gone into the boundaries. And
sure. Got that
and
lane.
the lane thing. That's absolutely right. And I don't know, what would you expect? I was always hopeful that would happen, but I was always prepared for the phone call I would get that he had overdosed, right? And and he did. He had several overdoses he shared during the time he was using, where he was brought back. So alive, and he's in rehab, and I feel that I'm here to support him in a very healthy way. So cautiously optimistic.
Sure.
But yes, it is good. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing this story. I think it's important for other parents to hear, and I think I'd like to finish on advice might be the wrong word, words of encouragement, words of wisdom, maybe, for other parents that are going through this, or caretakers, or a community, other people that might be going through this in whatever stage you wish to share, but maybe some words of wisdom for others. I know people will be not attracted, but will be drawn to hear this because they've been going through it in some way, shape, or form. So
well, I mean, there's various degrees of it, right? And and not all people are going to end up on the path that he was on, right? But I would say that you have to look after yourself first, because if you don't look after yourself, you're no good to anybody. That's one nugget that I would share. And I would say that seek support and community. I still do. I belong to a Facebook group called Parents of Drug Addicts. I found an online community. I found that during COVID, but there are other resources for parents of kids that are addicted, online as well as in person, like Al-Anon, or there's a narcotics version of that. Community around it, and being able to share with like-minded parents to know you're not alone, because there are lots of people. When I talk about the story, inevitably somebody will come up to me and say, "Oh, me too," like me too, right? And share and share. The more we share these kind of experiences, the more we take the stigma away from it. And it took me a long time because of shame and guilt. Let go of the guilt and let go of the shame. If we make it more open and communicate about it, then that leads to a path of healing, because somebody by sharing, may have a little resource for you, or or a little tidbit for you. Yeah. So You know, that's what I would say. And then the other thing would be, and I know it's not just one thing, but it's not you. Like, I blamed myself.
Mhm.
And, you know, we're all human. I mean, I wasn't the perfect parent, but I mean, I was a loving, caring parent. They didn't live in an abusive home. But addiction knows no social status. It knows no race.
Mhm.
Addiction can happen to anybody. And
Mhm.
you can get addicted to an addicted substance just by
Yeah.
taking it enough, right? So there is no shame, or you shouldn't feel any guilt, and it's not about you.
Yeah.
Your child has become, if in the case of addiction, they've just become
Mhm.
addicted, right? And
Yeah.
the child is not the addiction. The child is still the child,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Love
Yeah.
the child, hate the addiction, right?
There you
Yeah,
go.
well,
Yeah,
hate it.
absolutely.
Love the
Absolutely.
child.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Put the child
yeah,
first.
yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, if you have resources, we will certainly share them in when I post this in the summary. So please, we'll bring all those, and we will put, if you're open to it, we'll put contact in so people can contact you if
Sure.
they're,
Yeah.
if you're open to that.
Yeah.
I often have people say on these, those are the words I needed to hear right now.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sure there will be people out there that go, yeah, those are the words I needed to hear right now.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for that. I think sharing our story is such a gift, and listening to stories is such a gift. So I thank you for the gift.
Mm. Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to share the story. I appreciate that.
And for that, I think we will close this. Thank you so much, Kathy.
You're very welcome.
Thank you for your horses,
Mm.
for sharing their light with you,
Yes.
so that we may have you here like we did tonight.
Yeah.
And thank
Wonderful.
you
Thank
all.
you.
And thank you
Yeah.
for those that are listening. Thank you for sharing this space with us.
Yeah.
That we will close this up.